You're very welcome back. Now, we do have to mention that some of the details that will be discussed in this conversation might be a bit distressing. So if you do have young ears in the room, it might be a nice time to ask them to leave. In 2004, whilst working for a travel company in the Algarve, Hazel Behan was violently raped in her apartment.
Christian Brückne, who was later named as the prime suspect of the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, was tried and acquitted last year for that crime. Hazel is now taking her case to the European Court of Human Rights and joins us now. Hazel, thank you so much for coming in. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Because, of course, you have to keep on going back to 20 years ago to tell us
21
about...
years ago
21 years ago.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
Yeah, it was my anniversary yesterday. So it was kind of one of them moments that you really sit back and think, you know, this happened to me 2 weeks before my 21st birthday, so any plans I'd had for my 21st, they didn't happen. So it was a different kind of a milestone yesterday. Yeah, 21 years.
Take us back. What happened?
Yeah, look, I suppose it's a long story, but I worked as a holiday rep, I worked as a kiddie rep. I had wanted to travel, really wanted to travel, but my parents didn't want me kind of just going off with a backpack by myself. So it was a happy medium. It was the best compromise. That I worked for an Irish travel company, had my flights, my accommodation. They felt I was safe, but I also got to travel. So yeah, it ticked a load of boxes. And I had done it previously for this company in Mallorca. So, you know, I had like a season under my belt, but at that time I'd lived with somebody. I'd lived in the same apartment as somebody else. So when I went to Portugal, I was housed separately because my co-worker and still my friend he's male. So they didn't house a male and a female together. Yeah. So we lived directly next door. And yeah, look, at the 15th of June was no different to any other day. We worked really, really long hours, like 18-hour days. People, it's not at all what it's portrayed to be on the television. It's long, hard work for very little pay. And we would finish up roughly around 9:30, 10 o'clock after mini discos and, you know, the Wizard of Oz or whatever we put on in the hotel that night for the families. And I pottered around the corner to the small Irish bar where my then boyfriend worked. I kind of did that most nights, to be honest. And yeah, this night in particular I suppose it stood out because him and the owner were arguing with each other over the lack of trade in the bar or, you know, something ridiculous that night. And I sat on the steps outside with my friends. And when I said to him, you know, this needs to end, stop fighting, he told me politely to F off. And so I did. And I walked home by myself. Just for context, I walked like about 100 metres home. It was literally across the road, over a small footbridge into block 3 of where I lived in Praia da Rocha. And I got to my room feeling very sorry for myself because I'd had an argument with my boyfriend. I was 20, my world was over. And I lay in the bed, fully dressed, and I fell asleep. And obviously in my sleep, I made my way onto my stomach. And the next thing I remember was being called by my name. I was being woke up by my name. So, you know, this tells me it takes me longer to say even than the amount of time that it took to think it. You have all these things really quickly going through your head before you even open your eyes. At first I thought it might have been my boyfriend come to say he was sorry, but I knew he couldn't get in. So who else would it be? But they know my name. You know, it was really like milliseconds. And before I opened my eyes, I just knew that there was something wrong. And, you know, I've since learned about, you know, fight or flight, freeze or fawn. And I definitely froze and fawned. I just completely froze. So when I opened my eyes and seen this tall figure of a man all dressed in black and he was masked, carrying a knife, I just instantly froze. I didn't, I couldn't quite get myself together.
How could you? I'm really sorry. You're doing a job that so many of us have done. Have all walked home from nights when you work in Greece or Portugal or Spain. It's a normal thing.
Yeah. And, you know, I didn't walk down the main street or miles by myself. You know, I literally, not that it would make any odds, but I literally walked across the road.
Yeah. And you're dead asleep. And this happens. Yeah. And of course of course you did. You're asleep.
And he told me not to scream. And to be honest, I knew there's something in you. I think there's this innate thing in us that, you know, you'll fight back if you feel that you have a chance to win. But I knew instantly that I didn't. I mean, I'm 5'1" on a good day. I was an awful lot smaller then, and, you know, I knew I just wouldn't have had a chance against this person, so I complied. really, and he was very methodical. He knew exactly what he was there for. He knew exactly what way he wanted me to be positioned, to be in certain, shots, because he set up a video camera and recorded everything that happened while
You were
I was
tied
there.
up.
Eventually,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, there was different stages, I suppose, of the whole time that he was there. And eventually I was tied to a breakfast bar in the living space of the apartment. And it just, like, these apartments were guest apartments as well. They were just very basic. Now, to be honest, I wouldn't have been impressed if I got them on a holiday. But there was a small breakfast bar, and he had tied me essentially from the backs of my legs. I was hanging on the backs of my legs. So I was there for quite some time. And this is when he filmed, and he had like a rucksack he had whips, leather whips and things like that with him. So eventually he took me down off the breakfast bar, and naturally, like, your legs can't function. Like, I was like Mr. Soft, I just say, like my legs are just like jelly. So without being too graphic, like, there's obviously blood and there's other things. So you're sliding on a tiled floor, essentially. And it was then he had asked me to go into the bathroom of the little apartment, and I refused. It was the only kind of time I said, no, I'm not going out like that. I just had this idea that if he brought me into the bathroom, that was it. So he positioned me in a kneeled position over a small little bench sofa thing in the room, and placed my head. So I was head down on the bench. And I know how dramatic it sounds when you think that somebody's standing over you, all in black with a mask and a knife, and positions it in a certain way. I just honestly thought he was going to just take my head off. I really did. But he didn't, obviously. And he got a sheet from my bed and covered me with the sheet. But the sheet didn't really hit the floor fully, so I could kind of see, his movements and hear. Your senses are so heightened. Every other sense is just like you're listening, you're smelling things, you're everything. So I could kind of make out where he was in the room by the sounds that I could hear, and you could feel the swish of the air, when he passed the sheet. But he was packing up, essentially. He packed up everything, stepped out backwards into his shoes. And I didn't know he had gone, because the reflection of the light from inside the room on the window of the dark, I couldn't see outside. But he had, thankfully, and I managed to get out of the room.
You managed to get out of the room. I mean, incredible. You went down to the reception of the hotel, the police were called.
Yeah.
They take you up to the room. There was no English interpreters.
No.
Your experience with the Portuguese police sounded horrific, to say the least.
Yeah.
As things moved on, you saw reports of Christian Brückne, the main suspect in the Madeleine McCann disappearance. What made you come forward from that?
It was a really strange kind of come about of how it came to me, because I wasn't an avid follower, like some people are, of Madeleine McCann case. Now, I think you'd want to be living under a rock not to know about her or about her case, but I wasn't. And in June 2020, height of COVID, I was up to my neck in work, kids, the whole lot. That when it came to me, I didn't. At first, I didn't want to put two and two together, but I seen a photograph of him in one of the news articles that I seen online, and I just knew it was him because I seen his eyes.
You were certain that it was him.
Yeah.
This man, this person, prolific is a word to say in relation to what he has done up and down what we can point to in Portugal, in various other places, of people between the ages of 10 and 80 years old.
Yeah.
Violent crimes, violent rapes of women.
Yeah.
And this is known. This is assumed for him. Currently, he was in jail in Germany.
He's serving a sentence, for the rape of a 72-year-old at the time, elderly lady, a pensioner. She was an American lady. She lived not too far from where I lived, and it was a carbon copy crime. It was extreme. Like the similarities between the two cases are extremely similar, and it was investigated by the same police force. And just to say, it wasn't just my case that was heard on trial. There was me and 4 other cases. We were 5 trialed together. So, I mean, he has a history of, you know, horrendous acts against children. I think the first that he committed, he was 16 years of age, and that's something he's been convicted of. So yeah, he essentially carried out these crimes in plain sight and dodged a huge amount of warrants and police over the years. So he's a very clever criminal. Yeah.
Because in that case, he was acquitted. In yours, in your case.
He was acquitted, and in the judgment that I received, the judgment was made in October, but I didn't receive the written judgment until January. And in that judgment, on numerous occasions, it said that it was based on poor policing by the Portuguese. Because they just didn't. I mean, 4 days after what had happened to me, I went back to collect my things, and the blooded sheets were still in the bed. My fingernails were still in the bed. You know, they didn't collect any of this evidence. Yeah, so it's pretty frustrating, to put it very mildly.
Oh my goodness me, what you've gone through is just insane, Hazel. You waived your anonymity as well. You've taken this case now to the European Court of Human Rights.
Yeah.
What are you hoping to achieve from this?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, you know, I'd love to be able to wave a magic wand and just, you know, see people in mandated positions, police, you know, legislators, justice system, to just do better by particularly women and children, but for everybody. I think, you know, rape, sexual assault, any form of gender-based violence affects us all. If you're lucky enough not to be on the receiving end of it, the likelihood is that you will know somebody who is. And the last thing that you would want is your daughter. You don't want to be my dad, my mother, who sent me off at 20, you know, safe in the knowledge that I was going off to make all these memories and have, you know, the summer of my 21st birthday. The gasp that came out of my dad's breath is something, when I told him on the phone what had happened to me, is something that has lay, you know, heavy on my world and his since that happened. So as a mammy now, as a parent, I can't change what happened to me. There's no going back, there's no rewriting it, but heaven forbid something would happen to my girls. I would like for them to be treated with the very, very basics, you know, just with some dignity.
Standards.
Yeah.
We could talk to you about so much more, because this is something that you have decided to do. Like, you're putting yourself out there to try to do this in relation to victims of sexual assault, sexual crimes. And we know that he has been accused, he has been convicted of some things, accused of many other things, and not convicted of those things. But it is a case that continues to dominate news cycles. Yeah. And he's still in your, like, he's still there. Listen, Hazel, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us and taking the time and doing it so eloquently. We really do appreciate it, Hazel.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All the best. You're amazing.